Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, Objectively Dan. This is the live call-in show that happens every single Friday at 7 p.m. Central Time. We talk about what people believe and why. This is a live call-in show, so if you'd like to call in and talk to us about that, go ahead. Now is the time. But every single week, I have a special guest on my show, and this week is a local. That's right. It's Christy Powell. What's up, Christy?
Hey, not too much. Thanks so much for having me on. About time we did this.
I think so. So I was on your show a couple of weeks ago, which is Secular Sexuality, another show produced by the atheist community of Austin. And I thought, I should return the favor. And so now you are here on Truth Wanted.
Yeah, we're 2 minutes in and you already have failed to come anywhere close to the number of Matrix puns and references that I was able to slip into my show. So I'm feeling like the hospitality is lacking a little bit, but, it's fine. I'll just encourage everybody to go check out that show or, Thursday nights at 7.
Yeah, and the unsolicited Matrix references were mostly because we talked about the red pill, which is a philosophy about dating women that's just kind of over the top and
it's a nice way of putting it.
And we talked about that and just debunked some claims there, as well as just talked about a bunch of stuff. So check that out if you're interested, but don't check it out right now. You're listening to Truth Wanted, so you should stick around. Christy, you're an interesting guest because you are a therapist, and I thought at the beginning of this episode we could talk a little bit about mental health. We haven't really talked about that a whole lot on this show. And there's a lot to talk about with mental health. We've kind of had this movement in recent years of people being more open about talking about mental health issues and just kind of even admitting they exist, right? Because there's some people that don't even acknowledge that. And especially with COVID-19 going on right now and everything, people are talking about the effects of isolation and not being outside and seeing friends and family and stuff. And so on top of that, there's all kinds of crazy claims about mental illness and stuff that's just not true. And so it fits into the purview of this show, right? We're talking about what people believe and why, and people have a lot of different beliefs about, mental health and the various stigmas that come with it. So I guess I want to know first, as someone who, does it for a living, what do you think about mental health in 2020? As we talk about it, do you think it's positive that we're talking about it more? Do you have concerns about it?
Yeah, I can't say that I don't have concerns, but I do think it's a positive thing. I remember as a kid walking through the airport, 9, 10 years old, old enough to read, old enough to know that breasts were a thing that I might be interested in, but not entirely sure what that interest meant. And seeing signs in the airport talking about how they're raising money for breast cancer, and they were saying the word breast, and it was important to talk about breast, and all of these posters really emphasize that idea that breasts are a thing that we can talk about as a society and as a culture. And I don't know that ad campaign or any like it made a meaningful impact on the dialogue and the research that's been going on since the 90s, but I can't help but feel like it did something to cut back on the stigma. And when I watch TV now and I see, a couple of characters bragging about going to their therapist, or, maybe making self-disparaging jokes about being codependent or these things, there's a part of me as a therapist that's that's not quite what that word really is meant to be used.
Yeah.
But it does get me excited because I know I, for one, feel a little bit more seen when I'm recognizing that. And even if people are getting some of the wrong ideas, if they're beginning to ask the questions, if they're beginning to notice that this is a thing that you should know something about, that feels good to me.
Yeah, it's funny because you're talking about the breast cancer awareness. When I was in high school, everybody had the I Heart Boobies bracelet stuff. That was the thing. I don't know what the kids these days are doing with their bracelets in high school because it's been a minute. But I imagine there's probably been something similar when it comes to mental health stuff. I imagine that the people who are in high school right now are probably way more open to talking about mental health issues than when I was in high school. And I wasn't in high school that long ago.
Sure.
So like I think we're already kind of seeing those changes. And you're right, I see the same thing on TV and stuff. People are talking about it. You know, like you watch old comedy movies, and the joke sometimes is literally like, oh, this guy has to see a therapist for his issues.
Right,
Like
right.
that's the joke. It's
You,
like,
you should really see somebody like a
yeah,
professional, you know? I mean, yeah,
yeah.
that joke is on like every third episode of Seinfeld, and I get it. But you know, for all of the problems in the world, which, you know, this year it's hard not to start counting them up. But I guess I'm too much of a humanist. Like when I specifically look at things like gender and sexuality, you know, that's the type of mental health and therapy that I focus on.
Mhm.
When I'm getting together and having conversations with my like teenage clients, I'm amazed at the terminology that they have available to them. You know, I recognize it's a self-selecting group. Like if a parent is willing to pay me large amounts of money to sit and talk to their teenager about sex, that's a very different household than the one that I grew up in, no question.
Yeah.
But I have these 14 and 15-year-olds coming to me with a associate's level understanding of gender studies, things that
Mm.
my parents could absolutely not do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny too, even just talking about sexuality, like not even the, you know, any kind of problems you might have in your relationship and stuff like that's a whole other thing. But it's
Sure.
just being open about that. Like I think when I started to become more open-minded and I was kind of learning more about what researchers and scientists have had to say about sexuality and stuff, particularly in like therapy communities and psychiatry communities and stuff like the consensus for a while, it seems to be like, yeah, if a kid comes out and says that they're gay, like you don't have to change that. You know, like changing that isn't
It'd
like
be
a good
okay.
solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's fine. Like just like they can live their lives happily. You know, and it just kind of blew my mind. I thought I grew up with this idea that if your sexuality was like kind of different, you know, than the average, if you had like, you know, homosexual thoughts or something, then that was like a disorder. And I think
Sure.
that's what people have thought for a long time. Obviously, like, you know, it's more people are generally heterosexual than homosexual. I that's kind of hard to deny, but that doesn't mean that deviancy from the norm is something to be ashamed of, or it means that
Invalid.
there's something
Sure.
wrong with you, right? And that's kind of the nuance I think that gets lost on people.
Yeah, and we're building a society that is more aware of the fact that not everybody is identical, and
Yeah.
that's a good thing. But there's still a long ways to go. I mean, it's 2020, and there's still no national ban on conversion therapy. Conversion
Yeah.
therapy still exists in this country, despite two very important things. One, there's no use for it. Like nobody needs it because, as you said, there's nothing unhealthy, wrong, immoral, unhelpful, you know, negative to your health about being gay. And two, because it doesn't fucking work. You know,
Yeah.
like if there was an effective therapy, we could have a conversation about, you know, having that Sneetch's star machine where you can like change your orientation and, you know,
Right.
we could discuss it maybe. But the reality is this technology doesn't exist, and I can't imagine how it ever could. So
Yeah.
why are we monkeying around with it and pretending like this is valid?
I think it's just people who have no experience or understanding about how like organizations even start conversion therapy things and stuff like that. Like there's already been tons of documentaries, countless ones of people talking about like, yeah, I went to conversion therapy and guess what? It didn't work. Right. And even recent, there have been people like one guy in particular, who was part of the Exodus project. You're maybe more familiar than I am, who like started a conversion therapy place and like admitted that it didn't work like 15 some odd years later and had to like come to terms with that. And obviously this guy's being really public about it, but imagine all the people that haven't been public about that kind of stuff and maybe
Right.
realize that, you know, like it's really sad to see. Now, I haven't heard anybody in my personal life advocate for conversion therapy. I don't think I've only ever seen it online or heard from other people's stories and stuff. So I'm thankful for that, but I can't imagine what it's would be like to recommend that without knowing anything about the process of how that
Sure.
works, you know?
Well, and a big part of the problem is that increasingly it's not packaged as, well, we're going to make hit your son straight or whatever. It's
Yeah.
packaged as, well, we're going to toughen this sissy up. We're going to, you know,
Yes.
put this ne'er-do-well to work with a summer of like ranching and doing, basically forced labor under really unsafe conditions. And if they push back at all, we'll say that they're resisting the therapy. And I mean, there's just so much of that going on. Parents often don't know what these like wilderness retreat, transform your life type of camps are like. And there are just countless stories of people being injured. And that's assuming things go badly there, not just the damage that you carry from walking out of spending an entire summer or perhaps longer being told how worthless some fundamental piece of you is.
Yeah, it's awful. And yeah, it works on these stereotypes of, gay people being, or at least gay men being like effeminate. And it's something that can be worked out of you, which I don't know if you've talked to you definitely talked to as many gay people as I have. Some of those dudes are like they check off every masculine,
Sure.
like a stereotype I can think of. Like, I don't know where that, I guess, like, I don't know. Like, there's a spectrum to everybody, I guess. It's weird. It's just weird. It's weird in 2020 thinking about it. Like,
Sure.
I don't know. Like, we've had legalized gay marriage for like 5 years now in this country. And there's still people saying that wasn't a good idea. Like, look, how much harm has that done for society? Honestly, like, what are the negative impacts besides, two people can file on their tax returns that they're married now? Like, great. I don't know.
I mean, marriage was supposed to be destroyed. Like the institution was going to tumble to the ground. And I mean, of course, you have people very quick to point out, like, well, there was no COVID-19 before gay marriage. There was no climate change. Like, these hurricanes that we're seeing, there are always going to be disasters, and God knows they're increasing. But people like to frame that. I very, very much grew up in a high school where it was our understanding that Hurricane Katrina was because of the gay rights movement.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these things were tied to these like bullshit notions, all of these weather events and everything else.
Yeah, which of course, the one, like the French Quarter was notoriously the place that was not hit, and it has been known to be kind of a hot spot for, the gay scene for a while. Yeah, right. But yeah, it's funny. It's just really funny hearing that. I don't know. It's funny, but it's not funny, right? Because it's funny because it's ridiculous, but it's not funny because every time you hear that, like, that person has talked to somebody else in their life about that, and it's probably harassed somebody about it too. I mean, like, if you're willing to talk about that out loud to people, like, you're probably willing to talk about that to other people in your life too, where that's going to have more of an impact. It doesn't matter if I'm a straight guy, right? I've never had to face that discrimination. I've never had to have that. I've been accused of being gay as if it was an insult, right? Like, that was maybe the struggle I had to go through, but like, I don't, I can only be an ally to the people that I know, and my heart goes out to people who really struggle with that and have family members that aren't accepting, because that's, I don't know. It's hard for me to get my mind around that nowadays,
Yeah, I mean, the simple reality is that just because I tell people I'm a sex therapist, I can't go to a party without people either wanting to come and ask me like some dirty, I don't know how to ask my doctor about this question, which bring that shit on. I love that. You get me drunk enough and I'll start telling you things you really didn't want to know the answer to. But the other part of it is, because I give people that title, they want to come and approach me with their understanding of why, for instance, trans athletes shouldn't be able to compete in their appropriate gender category, or why this or that or the other, why they should be disallowed from a particular bathroom, or things like that. And we can talk about like right and wrong, and that's of course like a valuable conversation, but I don't know that we even need to go to that point, because there's so much science saying that transgender identities exist. It's so baffling to me to be constantly having these armchair scientists like want to come up and pick a fight with me, so much so that I eventually just like wrote a web page about it and wrote it on my business card and just started handing that out at parties, so I didn't have to keep having the same stupid argument 1,000 times. The science exists. All you need to do is read it and work to understand it.
There is like, there I want to talk about this a bit more too. Like, there's an anti-psychiatry kind of bias in this country, I feel like, and that's true, like, worldwide. I'm not saying like America is unique to that, but in this country in particular, like, it's there's definitely strains of that. I had a list of the different some examples and stuff. We might not have time to get to it now. Maybe later. That's okay. But like, I imagine when, like you said, you tell people you're a sex therapist, you probably get, like, people probably think you're some sort of pervert, or you just have, I don't know. I imagine that catches some looks, and people who might not understand like what that actually means and the services you actually provide for people. Just people they're not told what a sex therapist is in school or in a health class, or even honestly, a lot of places they don't tell you what a therapist does. They just work off the stereotypes they see on TV. They think you sit on a couch and you talk about how you I don't know, hate people in your life or something, and or it's like, oh, I'm having problems with my wife. That's the whole old just nonsense stuff you always see all the time. Not that those issues are nonsense, but it's just right. It's a one note joke. Again, I go back to this. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know.
Yeah, no, at lunch today, actually, my partner was talking about a coworker and said something along the lines of like, if she only knew, the crazy shit you and I get up to, nobody at work knows that about me. And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that everybody I work with just assumes that I'm having like crazy, kinky, bizarre, creepy sex.
Yeah.
And, since doing secular sexuality, like I guess a few thousand other people too. But yeah, there is that stereotype that I carry, which I'm happy to because of the work. But people don't understand what that work is or what it actually means.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't help too that I feel like, what like mental health professionals are in this country, can be kind of elusive if you don't know exactly what it can mean, right? Like, you can have a licensure to be a therapist. You can also have a licensure to be like a life coach. You can also have a licensure, there's all kinds of different certifications and stuff. And that gets confusing because you can talk to somebody that says they're a doctor, but they may be a doctor in like pastoral science or whatever it is. Like, we have this credentials problem, I think, and there's all kinds of quacks out there that try to make their money off that too by tricking people, and so it gets very confusing to the person who hasn't looked a whole lot into it and thinks like, yeah, I'm talking to this person who's a therapist, but actually they just took like a 20-day online course or something from some diploma mill or something, and thinks that they know everything.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of these coaching programs that are just multi-level marketing scams. Like, we've had some good coaches on secular sexuality. Like, they certainly exist. It's possible to be a coach of various sorts. But it's important to recognize that that's not the same thing as a therapist, which is not the same thing as a social worker or a psychiatrist. And our society doesn't do a good job of making sure people understand that distinction. And I recognize that comes in part from the field, but just look at the defund the police movement this summer. People are incredibly uncomfortable with valuing or recognizing that social workers or these other mental health professionals actually have something to offer our society.
Yeah, I think part of it might be too is that just things have changed so much in the field and just in our society. And so people might feel like they've been betrayed in some ways because, oh, they were saying this 10 years ago and now it's different today. And, you hear that kind of stuff too. And I don't know, like I said, if you're not up to date on that kind of stuff, if you don't know, I'm the kind of person that'll be like, well, I know that the DRSM says that like homosexuality isn't an illness or something, like that's because I have conversations with people like you, like a Joe Schmo on the street isn't going to know any of that, or I don't know. It's a tough problem. And I guess the best thing we can do is just, be more open about it, have more conversations, and hopefully not let, these stereotypes keep going on in our media. I think you're right. I think it is changing. I think people are having better conversations on TV and other places about it, but there's definitely room to grow.
Yeah, well, and largely, I don't see any of these things making really meaningful strides so long as we're continuing to fund mental health the way that we are. The
Mm,
way that our healthcare system operates, there's barely an opportunity for appropriate medicine, and there is half that opportunity for any sort of mental health treatment.
mm,
And so long as insurance is mixed up in it in the way that it is, and so long as we devalue it, it's not going to matter how open we are about it or how much we're
mm.
talking about it because people don't have access
They
to it,
can't
so there's
get
no
it.
interest.
Yeah, they
Right.
can't get it. Yeah,
So they're
that's so
not
true.
experiencing mental health treatment in any kind of
Right.
way, and it takes a while for that stigma. I mean, my 20 somethings, my teenagers are so incredibly different in the way that they view therapy than some of the older folks that I work with. And so I feel like there's reason for hope about changing some of those perceptions, but it is very frustrating to be in this, 100-plus-year-old field. And, even my own parents really have very little understanding and
Mm,
frankly pride for the work that I do. Uh,
mm.
and that's partly because religion casts so much doubt on it.
Yeah,
If Jesus is supposed to heal your heart, then what the hell do you need me for? Except that, I
yeah.
actually can help you.
That is the worst. I think that's the worst when people say like, "Oh, you're not depressed. You're possessed by demons." Like
Yeah.
I it boggles my mind that I read posts that say stuff like that, or a specific religious sects have talked about like Jehovah's Witnesses and Scientologists, that talk about how psychiatry is basically all evil and is trying to influence you in certain ways. I mean, they're not wrong that it is trying to influence you, but more so to like think in more healthy ways, I guess. But I don't know.
Well, and I'm not going to say we do it to ourselves, but the tools of counseling, the tools of psychology are dangerous weapons in the wrong hand.
Mm,
And so you
mm,
you see things like Nexium and these other organizations that
yeah.
lean into that and take advantage of those types of tools. And people are, reasonably wary. But if there was money and opportunity to actually experience this type of healing for yourself, it would change a lot of the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, here's to hoping that things will change so that people
Yeah,
can have those opportunities. Well, this is a call-in show. We got some calls
sure.
that want to talk to us. So before we do that, I want to give a special shout out to our patron of the week. Every single week, we get to shout out our donor, and our donor for this week is, wait for it, Disco Stew. Disco Stews, thank you so much for donating to Patreon. If you want to support the show and make it even awesomer than it already is, you can do that by going to patreon.com/truthwanted. And you can get a shout out on this show. So thank you, Disco Stew. And thanks to all the other folks that donate to this show. Cool. Well, let's get to some calls.
Let's jump in.
I want to talk to Brutus here. I think Brutus
Uh-huh.
has a really interesting question. What do you think?
Yeah, I know Brutus from Secular Sexuality. Thanks
Oh,
for
cool.
following us around.
Well, cool. Let's
All
go
right.
ahead and start with that.
How's
Brutus,
it
you're
going,
live
Christy?
on Truth Wanted. What's up?
I'm talking to you. And it's actually something that I did touch on a little bit in Secular Sexuality on one of my calls, but I think you two are about the perfect people to talk to about this because you're a sex therapist, and then Dan is a guy who's been in like the pickup artist world before, and he's kind of recovered from that.
Yeah, I'd say before. So
basically-
people who haven't seen that episode, right? I just want to make sure. I was never a pickup artist.
Just
I read
in the
pickup.
world.
Yeah, I like was reading some that red pill stuff in college, and I was like, some of these ideas are appealing to me. But I wouldn't have called myself a pickup artist. I want to be very clear about that because I
Okay.
don't want that
Okay.
on my reputation. Okay, so
All right. And it'd be totally cool. There are other progressive YouTubers who used to be in that world. So
yeah. I mean, it gets.
Former
I mean,
is a powerful word.
yeah. I seriously recommend people watch it because it is fascinating, some of the stuff that they tell, and how in that moment it can seem convincing to you because of your experiences and just yeah.
Oh yeah, I even found out that I'm a dom through it by accident.
Oh,
Just because
okay.
of the alpha male thing.
Right, the
That's
alpha male
so
kind of, yeah.
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 But anyway, Brutus, what do you want to talk to us about?
Well, I've been trying to basically start a movement, though I'm not entirely sure even how to do this, but I've been wanting to have basically it's a kind of a male positive feminist movement that would focus on helping men develop certain relationship and dating skills with women that would kind of pull them away from those types of communities and give them a more healthy way to kind of learn how to interact with women and how to have better relationships with women and not have all this pent-up anxiety and anger that often results in frustrated men joining hardcore right-wing groups and talking about how women are all sluts. But at the same time, women also, that's one thing I actually don't understand is they complain that women aren't fucking them enough, but then they complain that women are too slutty now. So that's one thing that I never really got, but that's a side thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's it's such a serious problem, and it does reach other parts of society. I think Trump got elected in part because of male anxiety and frustration. I think the funneling of men into these right-wing groups, a lot of these men are lonely men who are struggling, who don't know how to deal with this or that, and these right-wing groups say, yeah, you deserve to have women kiss your ass because you're a guy. Women,
Bruce, like the Proud Boys are really wrapped up in this type of ideology,
right?
And got name checked this week.
Yes, and I don't think it started with Trump. I think this has been going on I think this has been happening at least since Gamergate. I think that was kind of a big start to it.
Well, I think that Trump, that part of the reason Trump won is because of these anxieties. And the other reason that I wanted to bring this up is like women having equal rights and women having equal agency to these guys means women are going to treat me like shit and they just want to have power over me because they feel like women have always had power over them because they don't have certain skills for dealing with women.
Right.
And it creates a huge problem because now they feel like it's either you destroy feminism and put women back in the kitchen and force them to be barefoot and pregnant and kiss your ass all the time.
Right.
Or you're going to be sitting either being alone or a big black dude's going to fuck your wife and you're going to have to deal with it or something, which is part of the reason I think that they use terms like cuck because it seems like it kind of speaks to some of their anxieties about men stealing their women from them or them not having control over their relationships or them being abused.
Yeah, and to anybody who hasn't heard, like Brutus's language is pretty explicit, but that's like word for word, like what people have been posting about this stuff online. Like when Christy and I were talking about this, I think this has been going on for a while, and I think it's because of people's. You're right. They don't have the skills, and most of these dudes, like they're teenagers, or they're like just really young men. Like you'll have the stories of the people who have been married for a long time and they feel jilted and then they discover it. But like my suspicion is that a vast majority of these guys are pretty young and just don't have that life experience yet to have those healthy relationships. But well, Brutus, I want to answer your first question because your first thing was you wanted to start. Kind of a movement for this to kind of help people get out of it. And I would say there's a couple of communities out there that are trying to do that you might take some inspiration from. One of them is the male lib subreddit that I was talking about earlier. Talks that is kind of like the opposite of the red pill. It's dudes talking about healthy ways and how to have relationships with the people around them and understanding what it is to be a man in 2020 and deconstructing some previous narratives and maybe constructing narratives for themselves that work better for their identity. But as far as what else to do with that, I think Christy's the better person to talk to. So Christy, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know that there's like a particular book I can recommend that is going to, explain all of gender theory or anything along those lines. I would just say that any organization that you're putting together, you're going to want to include some female voices in it. Even a group
Yeah,
of men
we're
for
not-
men to heal men, if the issue that you're tackling is an issue of women, you're gonna want to include some female voices. And I would make sure you do that, not just in like the literature that you do, but on some sort of like board of directors or whatever else that might look like.
Good point.
Yeah,
Good
all
point.
of these issues, if you're hetero or bisexual, then all these issues are going to affect you. Even if you're queer, these will bite you in the ass somehow if there's just enough toxicity in our culture that's creating a problem. I mean, like when it gets really bad, there are groups of right-wing men who will straight out assault lesbians because they think that they've been broken or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's sad. It's sad, the violence that happens to these communities because of it's purely because of the socialization. I mean, maybe it's not. I don't know. I think that the strongest case to be made is for the socialization of how we've grown up and how men have perceived themselves in society as far as like what we deserve and what we're like, how we're supposed to operate as men, what's expected of us. And I think that really gets to people's heads, and obviously it's done a lot of harm. There's a lot of evidence for that. So any kind of deconstruction process that you're starting for people, I mean, good for you for trying that. I can only encourage you. We have like a whole lot of calls tonight. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we kind of wrap things up here?
Not much. I'm just trying to think of the marketing. Like I've tried to come up with names for it, like the white pill, but I don't think I want to create another goddamn pill.
Yeah, I would avoid any pill marketing.
Done. Yeah.
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 I don't know.
I mean, there's now the red pill, the black pill, the blue pill, which is the opposite of the other two. And it's just like, okay, we've taken enough goddamn pills.
Yeah, enough with the pills, right?
Yeah,
pills. I don't know. I can't help you with your marketing, but if you do something, like let us know. I'd be curious to know what you do with that, and I'm sure a bunch of other people would too. But thanks for calling in, Brutus. I hope we were able to give you some help. But I appreciate you asking us that because that's a good thing. It's a good thing to do, right?
Yeah, best of luck to you.
Best of luck. We got a bunch of people calling in tonight, Christy.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of people want to talk to us. So I think let's go to oh man, there's a lot of different calls. Some are more oriented towards you, some are oriented towards both of us. How about Sven in Washington? What do you think of that?
You're right. We have so many. I'm like struggling to track that one down. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, talking to Sven in Washington. You are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hello, Dan. Good to talk to you again. Good evening, Christy. How are you?
Howdy. Not too bad. What's on your mind?
So, I just wonder, I guess, your opinion if you think it's going to be a matter of changing the law or just changing the stigma in America, because I work in the hospitality industry, and 5 of the 7 hotels I've worked at, I've had to literally get them to change their code of conduct books, because while they're not allowed to discriminate on transgender, they are allowed to say that men, especially the Hilton code of conduct says, they know that gay men work for them, so it specifically says that men can have clear nail polish, but not colored nail polish, and men can't have hair below their ears. And it's just very, I don't know. I talked to a lot of my female friends about this, and they don't even know it exists in the culture. And it's just very strange to me that corporate America is allowed to say, this is how men have to dress, and this is how women have to dress, right, even in the society where we've been you can change whether you're male or female, but they can still dictate by how you appear, whether you say you're male or female.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a terrible thing. I'm curious what your question is or where you're headed.
Yeah, do you think this is kind of where I get into are Democrats really doing more than Republicans, and are they just showing face? Because it doesn't seem like actual cultural change comes from the laws that people, the transgender defense against being discriminated on. It's nice in theory, but like I said, when businesses still have these at will states. They can fire you for any reason. Are we truly, like, as a non-binary person, are we truly protected? Because jobs have turned me away for having nail polish on, because I'm non-binary. And
this is I want to comment on this first, if you don't mind, because I question this, not like, obviously we definitely need to update our protections, but even the civil rights laws that we have now, I wonder, are people truly protected under those laws? Because it's so hard to prove discrimination crimes for hiring and stuff like that. I mean, how many studies have been done on, people sending in identical resumes to places and somebody using a traditionally black name versus traditionally white name, and people rejecting, the black name more times than the white, right? Like even though like we have the legislation in place to where it's supposed to prevent things like that, to go to court over something like that and to just even start to prove something like that is just really, really hard for the person who would be the victim in that situation. And oh gosh, for trans folks, I mean, I obviously I think I could speak for both of us when we say we want to make sure that legislation's in place, period. But like, how do we enforce that? I don't know. Like, it's so difficult, right?
Yeah, you shaped your question around corporate America, which is, obviously a appropriate place to direct a lot of anger. But this question, I mean, especially as you're talking about food service or hospitality in general, I think the reality is, in a big city, in a large corporate setting, you're actually going to have a better chance of being appropriately taken care of. If you're working at a small town restaurant, I mean, there's really not any reason to hesitate about being very out front about that kind of discrimination. So, I'm not a legal expert. I don't know how we resolve these issues, only to say that if you identify as trans or in any way gender nonconforming, this is almost a given. And as much as I don't want to dismiss it or just sort of accept, well, I guess we just have to deal with this shitty thing. The reality is, I'm first and foremost just worried about where my trans clients are going to piss when they go on a road trip, let alone whether or not they are going to be eligible for hire at a business that they should very much be appropriate for.
The medication that they need or get the treatment that they need, because they might get rejected for one reason. I mean, like it's systemic, the issues that the trans community faces. And my heart reaches out to you guys, because it's going to take a lot of changes, not just with discrimination, I guess, to really kind of fix that. And we do need to get people on the same page. In my opinion, as straight cis white guy, right? Again, like my goal in my allyship is to inform other people who look like me and who have those similar experiences growing up as I do, to be like, yeah, like it's, we grew up around this prejudice, like I did too, but we have to recognize that the world is changing and it's for the better. And you can be a part of that change too, if you want to. But that has to take some debunking of old ideas and old myths about trans people that, just isn't true. So, yeah, I feel like we didn't help you as much as we really wanted to.
Commiserate, but maybe?
Yeah, more commiserated. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I guess my question was more whether it should be law or just a matter of time. And so I guess, it would probably be more beneficial to just let the culture change over time than trying to force laws where people
it should be law.
I mean, the two,
Well,
it's left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. The culture changes, the laws progress, the laws change, and the culture progresses. And we take those steps. So, I'm in favor of any legal protection that we want to extend to trans folks. I mean, honestly, if we want to make a bill that just allows all trans people to steal French fries from anybody that they want to, I'm in favor of that protection right now, because that's just where we're at as a society.
Yeah.
I don't know that there is any particular bill working its way or that could work its way through Congress to magically resolve these issues, though. There is a lot of our culture that needs to get in line.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, right? Because we were talking about gay marriage being legalized across the country. It wasn't legal in Texas in 2015, if I recall correctly, and it wasn't legal in a lot of places. And I think that legalization actually probably helped accelerate the acceptance of gay
100%.
couples
No
more
question.
so in those areas, right? So like there is a time, I think, sometimes where you got to do what's right and change the law, even if there's places, because people were making those states' rights, the states' rights arguments about, oh, each state should
In
decide,
defense of marriage and all that
yeah,
bullshit.
but it's like,
yeah.
is human rights a states' rights thing? I don't think so. But again, we could talk about differences in legal opinion and how we form the laws, but I'm not an expert in that. So hopefully that was helpful, Sven. I appreciate you calling, and good luck to you changing your environment.
Yes, I've been lucky enough.
Oh man, I hate it because the drop was on its way, and then they were talking in the middle of it, and it's like, like I'm not dropping them in the middle of talking. There's a bit of delay. I'm trying to move the show because, oh my gosh, guys, we have so many calls tonight. I want to try to get to as many of you guys as possible. Thank you guys so much for calling in. Man, okay, we've got a lot of stuff related to your expertise, Christy. So I'm gonna keep on that train for a bit. Let's go to Harry in Washington. What do you say?
Cool.
Okay, Harry, you are live on Truth Wanted. How can we help you?
Hey, Dan. We've talked before.
Oh, cool, awesome. Well, welcome back.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to pick Christy's brain, and as usual, just everything
sounds good.
Always.
Go for it.
All right. So okay. From my previous calls, I was a closet atheist for a long time, and the wife was a very deep theist. Then, and I got advice from Daryl Ray and all that, and we're like, oh, okay, just let her go with the whole, woo thing when she first came out of Christianity. And then she became an atheist, right? And then as things progressed, she comes out, okay, I'm a lesbian. I went through conversion therapy. So that had to do with our marriage thing. We had to discuss how that worked.
Okay.
Recent event, she comes out as trans, and she's transitioning to male. Okay. Which I'm supportive of, because married 20 years, we beat the curve, and she's still the same person.
Yeah.
Deep down.
Yeah.
Right.
Doesn't matter what gender they are.
Yeah, well, it sounds like she's also gone through a lot of abuse and has been put in a lot of boxes and is starting to make some space for herself. Or himself, if that's how they identify now. But it definitely sounds like it's been a journey.
I get a pass.
Sure. Yeah. So your partner does use he, him pronouns?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
I constantly though say she just because of habit, and they're like, yeah, cool. You know me for way longer that way. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the thing that comes up now is because they are adjusting to their new sexuality. Now it's like, oh, I'm going like almost like in the opposite direction, and like, yeah, I like being feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's got me like, how much of this am I just doing because? And I know you can't psychologically over a whole phone call, but I'm just like, should I really bring this up with somebody, kind of thing?
Yeah, and then, I take your point, but I think I might ask the question a little bit of, so what? Like if you're exploring your own gender only in response to watching your partner explore their gender, cool. Like when you see a good idea, ape a good idea, and you don't want to force yourself into any particular boxes, but if you're having fun trying things on, so to speak, great.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think that's just because you see somebody else doing it doesn't mean that your own experience is somehow invalidated by that. Maybe they've given you some ideas about how you can choose to identify with yourself. Like a common thing you see with the atheist community is like, oh wow, I didn't even know you could be an atheist, because you never met somebody. Like that's something you hear sometimes with that. And I imagine, again, I'm not in that community, but I think trans people realize, oh, I didn't know like this was a thing too. And so people pick up this identity for themselves, and that's where this idea of oh, you can choose to be gay or you choose to be trans comes from, I think, because people see it and monkey see, monkey do. But really, it's more like, oh, this person has the language and experience that kind of matches up with my experience. And this language is a good description that I didn't have before. And so I'd like to adopt that for myself. You know, there's nothing wrong with that.
Having that cultural technology. And,
yeah,
you know, you may find after, you know, years or maybe days or possibly decades of exploration that you are a cis male, and that's valid. But that doesn't mean that your experiences of wanting to explore this side of yourself, wanting to go spelunking in your own mind, don't matter. You know, how can you truly know that you're a cis male if you've never tried on a pair of lace panties and a dress? I'm not saying gender is that simple, but I do think that having that curiosity about yourself, regardless of who you are, is a really valuable skill.
Well, also, too, I'm going to bring this up, too. I mean, I was born in 1969, so it's like growing up, it was a whole 80s scare and the whole like gay, you know, like it was never
gay panic, right?
Shall we?
Yeah.
The gay panic. Also, too, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5", 300 pounds, and if okay, you put me in 4-inch heels, I'm 7 foot tall. So.
Hey, I'm 6'5" too. Okay, and if I wore heels, I think I'd look pretty good. So
hey,
I don't know.
I'm 6'4". I'm just not intimidating.
Well, that's the thing. I'm the guy. If you're like in male mode, if I'm like go down a dark alley, I have no fear of retribution, and that's
I get you. I get you. I'll say, but Harry, you would not be the first person who once, you know, at least identified as male and then tried on heels and being 6'5". You wouldn't be the first, and you won't be the last.
No.
You know,
and there's nothing about being tall that makes you less of a woman if that's who you are. There's nothing that makes you more of a man. You know, your height is just your height.
Yeah, it just feels weird sometimes because I stick out.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. I'm not going to dismiss that for a second, because that is the way our society treats it. We can talk all day about how things should be. You know, it shouldn't be harder to be trans than to be cis, but it is, and we should acknowledge that too.
Right. So also too, that this kind of brought in things, because the previous caller kind of brought this up with like the nail polish, right? Yeah. So one of the things, because I am sort of, shall we say, closeted, but I put nail polish on. And one thing I've noticed, being who I am, like, okay, another transsexual friend of ours going from female to male, they were on the flight side and like got beat so bad that they were physically injured. Now, I've noticed in this community, I don't have that fear, mostly because anyone short of having a gun wouldn't bother.
Sure.
And I find that hypocrisy really bad. You know what I mean? It's like almost to say like that white privilege thing. Well, it's that scary guy privilege, which really shouldn't be either.
No, there are pieces of that, and then there's a little bit of this sort of moral philosophy in our culture that says that trans men aren't a threat, right? And so it's not that we necessarily validate them, we're just less terrified of them, which, I mean, I guess like that feels a little bit better than to, you know, see somebody as a villain, but it doesn't really mean that you're seeing them as people. So, you know, I guess I don't know who wins in a suffering Olympics or what the value is of comparing those different experiences, only to say that it's fucking bullshit no matter how you slice it.
Right. With someone who is close to me, who is a cis woman, who we were talking about, you know, being trans and stuff and what that means. And she was on the side of like, oh, I just can't accept trans women, you know, being in my space and bathrooms and stuff like that. You know, I couldn't call them, you know, a woman in that sense. And I was like, well, what do you feel about trans men? And it was like, oh yeah, no, that's fine. Right. Yeah. Like they were like, and there was no switch in their brain that said, this doesn't make sense. Right. But hearing that out loud was just like, well, that's about as much of a double standard as you can have, right?
Yeah, so this isn't about science. This isn't about right and wrong. This is about what makes me feel good, which, you know, you need to listen to your own emotions. You need to listen to the things that scare you, but then you need to fucking do something about it. Educate yourself.
Yeah. You don't have to earn your gender. You don't have to pass through somebody else's checklist to feel like you are who you are. So I say live it out, like Christy was saying, if it takes some exploration, do it. Find some people that will support you, and in that journey and just, be happy.
And that's why I'm very grateful to my partner on this, because they're going through this and they've been very accommodating toward me as well, which I think that's a coin toss too, just because, hey, I'm going through this doesn't mean they're going to accept the other person going through it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And again, like this isn't the first story of a partner figuring out their identity and then that person figuring them out themselves. Like that happens. It's actually more frequent than you'd probably think, especially if you look up like trans community subreddits and stuff like that. Like this is a story that happens with people. So you're not alone. You're not weird. You're not unusual in that sense. Like it's out there.
Does surprise me.
Yeah.
Does it actually does surprise me, because you would think that oh my God, this would be the end of it. Yeah.
Well, if you love someone and they love you,
yeah,
what's the problem?
That's a big takeaway from that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can almost say that for our whole entire story. Every time we've called you, it's like, hey, if you love each other, stick with each other.
Yeah.
If you're happy and having a good time, not hurting anybody else.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Right.
Well, Harry, I hope we gave you some good advice. I hope that you you have a good journey, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, actually, just getting it off the chest really helped, and thanks a lot, guys. And I listened to both of you, so I'm like lurker on the wall on both your shows.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to help.
Appreciate you calling.
Yeah, thanks for calling, Harry. That was a good call. I'm glad we got to talk about that.
If you can reach just one person.
Yeah, like this is somebody who is older than both of us, right? Who is like finding like wisdom in what we have to say. I think that's incredible. Like that.
I mean, it was not lost on me that he is exactly my father's age, and grew up with a lot of the same, cultural panics and cultural concerns. And, we were joking before the show about how my dad was terrified of Dungeons and Dragons because of a stupid made-for-TV movie that convinced him that it was evil. And those kinds of milestones informed his life such that he and I don't speak, because I am this monster to him, because he watched, the AIDS epidemic and these other issues through a different lens. And so to speak to somebody like that last caller and hear that there is, still an opportunity to witness those things and come to a more reasoned understanding.
Yeah. And again, it's culture that informs us this too. I mean, like we're talking about jokes and movies and stuff. You go to like, you can find a bunch of movies from the 90s, 2000s even, that'll say like the joke is that they're dressing like a woman. And that's not how. Like, or sometimes the joke is straight up that they're trans. Like that's it. Right. Like there's no punchline. That's the
entire punchline. They're
just trans, and it's like. It's wild. It's wild that we got away with that for so long, but I'm glad the world's changing,
really I say this on my show all the time, so I apologize for repeating myself, but as much as it is easy to get frustrated, I have a partner who just loves 90s sitcoms. And so I'll come home, and while she's cooking dinner, there will be Fresh Prince or Sister Sister or Family Matters or Seinfeld or The Simpsons or whatever else. And it's hard to watch a 90s sitcom and not feel like we've made some progress. Not to feel like things are getting better on a lot of these issues, because there's so many jokes. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with it, was the big Seinfeld joke about homosexuality. And, I guess you could say that was a progressive idea, that there's nothing wrong with homosexuality, but Jesus, does that not feel like progress in 2020?
for humor. Yeah. And like it was punching down. It was taking that to someone's expense, which like I think that's the difference now, right? It's like there's tons of people who are gay and making fun of themselves or making fun of like the community, stuff like that. That happens. It's just the context is different, right? The self-deprecation there is more positive. It's more like it's not like the joke is that they're gay. It's the joke is that like, oh, there's things that we do in our community that you see patterns of, you know, like that's and if it's coming from somebody who's actually a part of that community, I mean, that's totally different from two, like straight dudes just joking about, oh, I don't want to be gay. I don't know. That's my Seinfeld impression. It wasn't very good. But anyway, yeah, we got a lot of callers here, Christy. I want to get to some more folks. Let's go ahead and see who we can talk to next. I want to, let's talk to David. We're just on a train. We got a lot of people that like, you are the perfect guest host for us. I'm glad you're here with us, Christy. But we're going to talk to David. You are live here on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi. So what I wanted to call about changed once I heard you guys talking at the beginning of the show. So I'm a closeted bisexual. That's the label I'm using.
Sure.
But I grew up conservative Christian fundamentalist family. Dad's a pastor, where homosexuality and any other sexuality that wasn't hetero was an affliction of the devil or a mental illness, which in that philosophy, it was an affliction of the devil anyway.
Right. Yeah. It's just a demon. Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's what I grew up with. And so I have those concepts still kind of ingrained. I'm a relatively new atheist and skeptic, but I still struggle with that label, bisexual, because of that. There was a incident growing up. I was 6 or 7 with a child molester, and so forever my view in my own head was that is what caused this attraction to men, and it's a sexual attraction. That's another thing I've heard from people in the LGBTQ community, and I haven't heard anything against it, is that I don't have any romantic notions towards men. It's purely sexual, and that means that I'm not technically in the LGBTQ community. It's just a fetish for male genitalia.
Sure. I mean, I recognize this is pretty heavy material, so I want to be really respectful even as I kind of jump in here. We can, play fun games with words all day and talk about the difference between being homosexual versus homoromantic, about whether or not cockhounds might be a term that we could throw around and whether or not they fit into the bisexual community. And, there's some value in that sort of like parsing discussion, but ultimately, you are who you are. That's not changing just because of the language that we drag it through. And if the thing that you are is an idea that can be communicated to other people with a word, and that word is bisexual, then great. We don't need to get any further into it than that.
Yeah. I echo that. It's like whatever label makes you most comfortable and whatever community you feel like you can relate to in your experiences with, I mean, I say go for it. Like this kind of gatekeeping that happens, it's unfortunate, but it happens with lots of communities, not just like LGBT communities. It happens with the atheist community. It happens with Christian communities. It happens with all kinds of communities. And
and particularly marginalized communities. When there are resources to go around, you get a little bit more picky about who you give them to. And so I recognize that the queer community writ large can be very exclusionary, but I think that just goes to show the amount of pressure that they've been under, that we've been under for so many generations. As that changes, we start to see a little bit more inclusivity.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think about that, David?
Okay. So, trying to think of how to articulate this best. So I guess the main mental block that I'm having is that idea that event that happened to me as a child is the cause of my attraction.
Yeah, I hear that's what it's coming down to for you. And I will just say that I can't tell you about you or tell you about your experiences, but I can tell you that there's really no data or evidence in hundreds and thousands of different research studies, different survey results, different demographic looks, different longitudinal examinations. Like, there's so many ways that we've tried to look at this question, and the only thing that we can find that may be even vaguely trauma related in terms of your orientation would be trauma in the wound in terms of androgens and access to hormones. Even that research is really inconclusive and kind of confusing. So if anything, I would suggest that your sexuality may have been limited by a painful experience, that traumatic experience may have blocked off parts of your body or parts of your experience. And so there may be things that you are potentially able to be interested in, things that you might be drawn to or attracted to, people that you might be interested in, that you are perhaps repulsed by or made uncomfortable by because of negative associations and because of that traumatic reaction. I can't say that there's any reason, though, to think that you would have been straight if you hadn't have had these traumatic experiences. There's just no data to back that up. And while I respect your experience, I hope that you can put that demon to rest a little bit tonight, because there's just no reason to believe it's true.
Well said, Christy. Well said.
So, coming off of that, because of how I grew up in a purity culture, on top of that experience, there's a lot of guilt. The times where I have had sexual interactions with other men, any sexual interaction, of course, brings guilt from that purity culture, but it's compounded when it's with someone of the same gender. Do you have any suggestions of resources or just advice for dealing with that or starting down the path to deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, sexual healing can be a really complex journey. You know, I would really recommend, more so than picking up a particular book or taking an interest in a particular podcast, these sound like the type of issues that you're going to want to talk to with a LGBTQ affirming or a very sex positive therapist. You know, I might point you just last night on Secular Sexuality, we did an interview with Grace Stevenson about a new organization called Glimmer that helps provide people with connections to queer affirming therapists. And that may be, weglimmer.com could be a good place to start. Of course, the Secular Therapy Project, organizations like ASECT or even Psychology Today can help you get that relationship started. But I can't help but feel like that's going to be vital, because as much as you may be able to grow and learn on your own, there's a good bit of healing that needs to be done here. And that's something that's usually best when done with a little bit of help.
Okay. Yeah, and the Secular Therapy Project is something that I've sought out, but without insurance, finances are a deterrent.
Yeah, I recognize that. And so I would say Glimmer is another free organization that maybe will put you in touch. As finances are a concern, perhaps Psychology Today or something like openpath.org may be a better place to look, just to say that therapy is expensive and it can be difficult to access. But if you are persistent, if you make this a priority, there are perhaps more opportunities than you think.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. David, I can't tell you any more than what Christy can tell you. You know, Christy is definitely a bigger expert. If you wanted one book, I was going to recommend a book actually to a previous caller that I liked. It's called Gender Outlaw on Men, Women, and the Rest of Us by Kate Bornstein or Stein. Is it Stein? One of the two. I think that was.
Okay.
And you know, that book doesn't talk about purity culture as much. It was, you know, it was more related to the previous caller. But like, I think in reading in that experience of how somebody who grew up as one gender and then thought they were another gender and then didn't have any recognition through that, along with, you know, differences in figuring out their sexuality in an age where that was way less accepting than it is now. That was inspiring to me and kind of gave me the insight into, wow, not only can somebody do this, but also they can have good reason to, and they can find themselves in that and be confident in who they are and not have to feel the guilt that a purity culture has put on them. So that would be my one recommendation.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, so that's Gender Outlaw.
That's Gender Outlaw. Yeah, Kate Bornstein or Stein, one of the two. But anyway, that's all the time we got for this call, David. But thanks so much for calling in. I hope Christy and I were helpful. Christy more so, obviously. But yeah, like man, like that's tough. You know, and that we're talking about stereotypes tonight. That's a stereotype that LGBT individuals are the victims of sexual abuse. And that is kind of the reason as to who they are. And gosh, how awful is that?
Yeah. You know? And it plays into this like larger patriarchal idea that sex changes you on a fundamental level. That having sex with a man in particular, no matter who you are, is going to transfer you from being a virgin to a slut, is going to transfer you from being straight to being gay, from, you know, turn people into these vampires. We are just made so uncomfortable by any sexuality that is outside of the norm, outside of what is considered common or typical, conventional or acceptable, that we'll come up with anything to demonize them with. And that gets in the way of trying to heal from a very real traumatic experience. You know, the fact that this caller's bisexuality has been damaged is its own question and concern, because there's this larger issue of, why was he attacked in the first place? Why was this allowed to go on? And what have we done about it, you know, in his life, but also just larger society? What are we doing to offer healing to these people rather than making them just feel ashamed because of something that happened to them?
Agree. It's this reversal of, you know, the standards that we live by. You know, we had this hierarchy, I think people had, where you had straight people like myself and then everybody else down below. And now we're just trying to flip the script. We're not saying, oh, one's better than the other. We're just saying, hey, this is all on a spectrum of, you know, identities that people can be, and that's okay. There's no reason to discriminate on that basis alone. You know, if someone's being, an asshole to you, then maybe that's one reason why you're not going to be as nice to them or something. But that's separate from just like someone being who they are. You know, that's not a great reason to, you know, discriminate somebody, right? And I'm using that word discriminate liberally in that sense, of course. What I mean, like, you know, like I don't want to talk to this person, so I'm making that anyway. You know what I'm trying to say. We got a couple more calls here. I want to try to get to as many people as I can tonight, but man, thank you guys so much for all calling in. Stay on the line unless a call screener talks to you. Otherwise, I want to talk to you. I think we've talked to somebody from Germany before, but I can't remember off the top of my head if we had. This might be the first one from Germany. It's Mira or Mira? Mira from
Hi.
Germany. What's going on?
Yeah, so my mother was really into alternative medicines and stuff. So that's pretty much what I grew up with. And now I'm having a chronic illness, and I find myself when people come and approach me with these wonder cures. I feel myself drawn into that. Like it's tempting to believe that there's something out there that can help, and that I just need to try all this stuff. But I'm mostly skeptical, and I have read a lot. I know that it's basically the placebo effect working, and sometimes I'm wondering, like, if my health problems come from not being vaccinated and instead being sent to these parties to get natural immunity. And it's just really messing with my head. And
well, go ahead, finish your thought.
I just wanted to ask you if you have an idea what I can do against being drawn into all this woo.
Well, talking to us helps, I think. Actually talking to somebody about it and saying, hey, I think this is all BS. I think that's just helpful on like a cognitive level, right? To kind of get that out there. Because sometimes we can't say that to, friends and stuff that, it might not be polite in that moment, but maybe, we really want to say how we feel. So you're making the first right step. And I would say beyond this conversation, I mean, there are probably other people in your community that maybe share the same chronic illness that have a Facebook group that you can talk to. And I guarantee you they're talking about this too, because people with chronic illnesses, like this happens, and it's at least common here in the United States. I mean, there are people in this country that think you can heal your cancer by eating blueberries. I said that last week too, but it's true. I mean, like, there are all kinds of medical myths that are persistent because somebody's trying to make a buck. That's been true for all time when it comes to medicine. That's never not been true. So it's something that you have to look out for, even if you don't have a chronic illness. I have to look out for that. Christy has to look out for that. We all have to look out for that when people are talking about it. And it's good to just know, okay, what kind of data are the people who make this drug or the people who make this treatment, what are they looking at? Has this been done independently? Has this been independently researched? Has this been done by universities, or has this been done by private companies who may have an interest in this? Has this been regulated by the FDA? I guess it wouldn't be the FDA in Germany. I don't know what the equivalent is, but point is, there are methods and processes by which we can vet this stuff beyond just talking to skeptics, right? People who are more knowledgeable about the individual specifics of the kinds of medicines we look at than you or I. But like in this country, and I don't know if it's true for Germany, but like you can go to CVS and there's entire aisles of just placebo medicines. We're talking about just sugar water, basically, if we're talking about homeopathic cures and stuff. And as long as when you start looking at this stuff as much as we do, like you kind of see the science pretty much right away. There's a lot of the same kinds of language and a lot of the same kinds of marketing that's used. But that's my recommendation. Go to a Facebook group with other people that you can talk to about it and see what they have to say. People who have been, because there might be people who have tried those treatments before and can tell you if they work for them or not, So that's my suggestion. What do you think, Christy?
Yeah, I think being in community is incredibly important. But I think the word I would introduce into the conversation is just one of balance. You know, you talked about being afraid of, well, this is just the placebo effect, or this is just that. And yeah, we want to be using good evidence-based practices. Just because somebody in a Facebook group says that this worked for them doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. But if you are enjoying it, if you're experiencing a sense of relief, that may be enough. And I would encourage you to maintain some skepticism, not just about these sort of more wooey or homeopathic or alternative style medicines, but about the medical establishment, to an extent, to say, just because this is what the pill the doctor gave me, to be your own advocate, to be looking in forums, like what are other people seeing or saying about this medication, and to be, constantly kind of pushing and advocating for yourself, while also recognizing that the whole point of advocating for yourself is to make your life better, not to necessarily get you the right medicine. I mean, certainly that's a goal, but the ultimate goal is that you find happiness. And so I would encourage you to embrace a little bit of balance and not feel as if you need to master these things or only do exactly the right things, so much as do the things that are leading you towards a sense of happiness and relief in what sounds like a really overwhelming and stressful time.
Yes. And last point for myself, as Christy rightly pointed out, don't believe the first experience you see in a Facebook group.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it wasn't quite, I hope you knew what I meant when I was trying to say that, right? I want you to find community with other people that, like, you can talk to about this stuff, and you might see some of that. But like the thing about talking to people in those forums and groups is that there's always going to be the skeptic. There's always going to be some people talking about it and stuff. And so you can at least get some other perspectives and points of views on things. And even then you can still be careful by making sure you're looking at the wording that they're using. You're looking at the sources that they're using to back stuff up, hopefully that both of our advice is helpful there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the online groups actually, I think, are you often see someone writing about this thing that helped them so much, and it's almost like a lot of these forums and groups get targeted by people who want to peddle their product.
Sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, you see like a couple of comments that are very, very positive, and then someone else who says, "I've tried this and this is bullshit."
Right. Well, any kind of new treatment or medication you take for yourself, you should see your doctor first anyway. Right. I think that should be a base ground line rule. So if you see something that interests you, that should be the person you talk to probably first. Ask your doctor about what this can do for you today. I mean, like it's scary. I can't imagine. I cannot imagine what it's like to, go through what you have and then figure out, like, is there a solution? Because people do, like, rationalize things that they otherwise wouldn't when they're fearful for their own life or for the life of a loved one. And I think we can all share experiences of someone we knew who was had some treatment or did something done, and it can be terrifying sometimes, the stuff that we put into our bodies, and we don't even know where it comes from. So keep being skeptical, but like Christy said, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Take things slow when it comes to looking at anything new you do for yourself, because if you want the truth, that takes some time. It doesn't come right away sometimes, right? So there you go. I think that's the most we can do for you tonight.
Okay, I watched some of your show from last week. And you had this caller, Trina, who said she could sense.
Yeah. She said if you put your hands in front of somebody, she could sense where people were hurt at, which was interesting.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised that you had never heard that before, because with me growing up with all these alternative medicine claims, it's a really common claim in the community.
Really?
People can do that, and that you can also just like send healing energy from your hands into these painful areas. I think what I've heard about it is that if you have someone like pay attention to somewhere where you are in pain, and you know they are trying to sending you like healing energy, your body will release certain hormones that will dampen the pain for a while. So you actually feel like it helped.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the method of action can be complicated, but we're really talking about focus, no matter how we slice it. Like, it doesn't need to be magical for somebody to walk up to you and recognize that the way you hold yourself, the way that your body is postured or positioned, that you may be holding pain in a particular place. When they highlight that and bring your awareness to it, it may cause you to kind of reconsider that pain. And, you know, whether we're talking about hypnotic processes or things like somatic experiencing, or, you know, any of these different branches of psychology, it doesn't have to be magic for there to be some truth in that. But of course, you're taking like just the right amount of truth to walk into a situation and make these ridiculous claims that can end up really hurting people.
Yeah. Like, the thing about doing this show is you hear so much about so many different things. And when I hear something that's totally new to me, it's like, I don't know what this is. I got to like spend 5 hours reading about this later. You know what I mean? So I guess this is one of those things where I need to look more into it. But thanks for that insight. And now I know a bit more about how that works. Just another confidence trick is what it sounds like to me.
A little bit.
So that's not anything new. But anyway, thanks, Mira. Thanks for calling in. Again, I hope that we were helpful. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you what you can or can't take. All I can say is do research, do good research. That's it.
And take care of yourself. This is a vulnerable time in your life, and I recognize that you're anxious about being taken in. So, just be kind to yourself as you go through it.
Yes. So, folks, I'm so sorry. We got time I want to take one more call here really quickly, and I think that's all we got for tonight. We're gonna go into Discord though, so don't go away. You can talk to me and Christy in the after show Discord. So if we didn't get to your call, we can talk to you in the Discord chat for that. But for now, we just want to get to one more call here before the end of the show. We're talking to Noel. Noel has they, them, and also he, him pronouns. Noel, what's going on?
Hi. Okay, so hi.
Hi.
I just figured this would be the perfect show to call because you're both. I hate to use the word expert because
not me.
Sometimes it's negative connotations. Like, people are like, "Oh, you can't trust experts anymore," but you're both very knowledgeable. Dan in like, I don't know, weird conspiracy theories.
Yes.
Bullshit detective.
I read too many internet forums and books about dumb stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so a little tiny. I'm gonna try to be super brief because you're like trying to end the show. But so my like life goal is to start a trans like nonprofit.
Hell yeah.
Specifically for like, especially like underprivileged minority like trans youth. Because there are like adult like gay bars and clubs and everything. I want like a cafe, you know?
Sure. Yeah, some kind of youth cafe.
Besides that,
Yeah, I mean, youth cafes are an effective modality. I mean, there is an organization, just based on that brief description you gave us, is an organization who does work very much like that here in Austin. I know the audience is everywhere, but I'll go ahead and shout out Youth, just because they're a great group.
Oh, I've heard of them.
Cool. Yeah, so you're looking to put something like this together.
And we have the Dolores Project, things like that, that kind of like sometimes geared towards Urban Peak specifically does. The Dolores Project sometimes does. But anyway, so with that in mind, I my grandparents are like super fundy. My granddad lives to call himself a skeptic, even though he's not. He's only a skeptic and thinks he wants to be a skeptic about like trans and gay.
Right. A skeptic about the things he doesn't understand or like.
Yeah, if he is skeptical of the science on being trans, he doesn't understand how to read science.
Oh God, yes. He's skeptical on evolution too, but that's a whole nother thing.
Oh man.
But he's also really smart. He knows so much information, so he's so hard to talk to because he has a comeback for every single thing you say, and it's just really hard to talk to him about it. But as someone who wants to be a trans educator, as someone who wants to teach people and wants to go, you're a trans teenager and your parents really don't know what they're doing, but they want to help. So I want to be able to help teach them and you as the trans teenager. But really, I want to work with your parents because like my mom is that. She's pagan. She's not fundy at all. She's pagan, so that's questionable. But like she wants to learn. She's just sometimes really misinformed or uneducated. And when she gets corrected, that's okay. On the other hand, my grandparents are the exact opposite. If you correct them, you're wrong.
Yeah. And
I preach to people that it's not their job to teach their parents, because if that makes you miserable, just cut them off, especially if you're an adult. But I feel like it should be my job.
Yeah, I mean, I said this once like on Twitter, and it was like one of the most controversial things I ever put out there. But like, being old is not necessarily an excuse for not being willing to change your mind, right? Obviously, there's studies that show that as you're older, right, you're less likely to change your mind on things. But how much of that is cultural versus like biological, right? And I'm not talking about like obvious signs of cognitive declines, because some people, they are just set in their ways because of their lifestyle, where they're from, or, you know, just who they are. But how many accepting mothers, fathers, grandmas, and grandpas are out there who definitely grew up in a time where, you know, the issues we're talking about now are not as open and we're not as accepted today. And there's tons of them, and they weren't always like that. People do change their minds. And I think giving them those resources is probably a smart idea. You know, I do wonder if there's resources out there that already exist that you can kind of take, or maybe get in contact with some of those folks and see, hey, how are you doing this? Because I want to do this. Because I imagine they probably want to spread that stuff out as much as you do. So they probably would be willing to give you that. So have you tried looking into any other organizations to see what they're doing to try to copy that model, or what's been your process there?
Yeah, or even see if there's somebody in your area who's already doing a great job of what you want to do. You know, if you want to put up your own shingle because there's a need that you can fill, great. But I might encourage you to be looking around and seeing if there is perhaps another effort that you can join.
Well, like mine is like a super far off goal, like way into the future.
Sure.
But like that's what I'm actually working on, like volunteering or working with one of the projects here in Denver that are specifically geared towards that. Mine is a little different, the idea that I have for mine, because like I'm a psychology major. I want to get a bunch of like volunteers that are like therapists and everything that want to do like work pro bono with specifically teenagers that would never have the money to do that otherwise. But for me, like talking specifically to my grandparents, I have no problem talking to other people's family. None. Yeah. Because I'm a complete third party. They don't know me. I mean, like they know me from maybe just meeting me, but people that I've known my whole life, it's like they automatically see like 12-year-old me.
Yeah, absolutely. They know your past. They know your experiences. They can judge you on a level that other people can't, right? Like, and it's hard to mitigate that. And I think there's value to having those services for people who are struggling with that with their own family, and you know, providing that work for them sounds like, I mean, what you're saying to me right now sounds like a great idea. I don't know how we can help you with that other than we encourage you to go seek out people who are already doing that kind of work and see what you can learn from them.
Mostly my question was like, if you have, I don't know, like, because what I've heard is like Anthony Bongdabasco style, like approaching my grandparents with something specific. but I don't know if I should like bring someone else into that picture, because I'm trans. My older sister is in the queer community. My younger sister is. My mom is. There's so many people in my family that are. And yet they're all younger than my grandparents, so they don't give a shit. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if I can curse on your show. They don't care what they say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you want to approach it from a street epistemology, point of view, my recommendation, and maybe other people would disagree, but I actually think a one-on-one conversation is probably best in that case, because you just have more control of the flow of that conversation. And I don't mean to say you're trying to control their answers in that conversation, but just that you're able to keep on topic and really ask the questions that you want to ask with that other person. Because ultimately what it sounds like to me is you really want to challenge them about the beliefs that they have about trans people, or just about those kinds of issues in general, right? And there's no shame in really challenging somebody when you think that needs to be challenged. There's appropriate times to do that. I would say, let them know first that you're interested in challenging that, so that you're not taking them completely by surprise. But also, there's Pico coming in across the camera there. But if it is something that you feel like is out of your control, if you don't feel comfortable having that conversation yourself, maybe it would be a good idea to have somebody else there with you. But that's going to be based on your own level of comfort. If you feel like, no, I think I got this, then yeah, do it solo, because that way it's just you and them, and they may say something to you that they may not want to say to somebody else. But if you don't feel safe, then yeah, have somebody else with you.
I mean, I definitely feel safe because they have no power or control over me. They're sort of disowned me, but I know for a fact they'd still talk to me. So I don't even warn them, because I know for a fact if I go, hey, I want to talk, they'll know what it's about.
Well, yeah. I think that raises the question of why. Why have this conversation? And I'm sure that there are some very good reasons. Perhaps because you want to rebuild a connection. Perhaps because you want to correct a misconception. But I do wonder about the why, because if they are not likely to change their mind, how are you benefiting from it? And if they are likely to change their mind, then great. If they're not, but you still feel like it's your, constitutional duty or whatever else to correct this misconception, then I guess go for that too. But I guess I would really ask yourself, why are you doing this? And then try to figure out, how do I get the thing that I actually want?
The sad truth is,
if it was up to me, I'd just cut them off. I'm sorry. If it was up to me, I'd just cut them off. But my mom still wants to have that relationship with them, because my mom doesn't have anybody except for her kids and her parents. That's it. And so she wants to keep that relationship. So I want to be cordial, but I'm not going to let them go and just talk shit, because they will.
Yeah. I mean, having those boundaries to protect yourself and protect other people, that's its own important and separate concern. The amount of abuse that you're willing to put up with, the amount of shit that you're willing to eat, that's an important question. And if this conversation is about limiting that shit, then that gives you a different approach than if you are trying to change their mind. Those are not necessarily opposing goals, but they're different goals. And I think it's important to know what your goal is, because I guess I'm still hearing a little bit of, I don't know if indecision is the right term, but that's something I think is important to go into with a set intention.
I agree.
Right.
If you don't know what you're getting yourself into, if you don't know the reason why you're doing it, then they can say, hey, I feel like you're coming into this conversation to attack me. You have this agenda, whatever. And if you do have an agenda and you make that clear, yeah, actually, I disagree with you on this thing, but I want to have a relationship with you, and I think maybe I could change your mind. Well, that's different. Yeah. Hey, I just want to see if you've considered this point of view, because this is how I feel about it. If somebody said that to me, I'd be more than willing to talk to them about it, because it's yeah, show me something that I haven't heard before. But I'm also not your parents or your grandparents, so I don't know. Maybe they're different.
Yeah. They love to talk. They love to talk about politics and social issues and everything, but only if you agree with them, obviously.
Of course.
So when I started getting interested in politics and social issues on the opposite side of the spectrum, they went, oh my God, the liberal media.
Right.
It
But
kind of went downhill.
it's good though, if you are keeping up that relationship with them, right? Then there is actually a better chance that you would change their mind rather than some stranger that they don't know. Because
Right.
you know, the fact that they do know you means that they do know your life experiences. And yeah, maybe that comes with some judgments, but that also comes with the idea of if they respect you enough already, if they truly know you and they truly like do want to know what you think about something, they might be more open to listening to that than like me or Christy, who are just, you know, strangers on the internet. So,
Right.
I don't know. They believe some weird conspiracies from strangers on the internet.
well, that's just 2020. I mean, I can't help you there, other than we need to continue having these conversations. And I don't believe in the idea of just giving up on people. You know, I
Sure.
think I have seen it is, you know, if people have given up on me, I wouldn't be here right now. And that's true for a lot of
Kind of
people.
like why I don't want to give up on them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they can change. Maybe.
It's complicated. It's complicated because you have those familial ties and you're in jeopardization of if you really think that you're in jeopardy of, you know, of jeopardizing that relationship, I guess, then, you know, consider your actions carefully. But otherwise, if you're their kid, if you're your family, then I guess it's worth a try, right? Because you're only going to be you. You're not going to. You
Right.
sound like you're probably not going to change, right? So maybe they might as well try to accept
I'm the
you.
loudest of my siblings.
Yeah. So why not give them a chance to accept you
Cut
first?
them off. They don't talk to them.
Yeah. Give them a
And
chance.
I'm over here like I don't want to cut them off, really.
Yeah. Give them a chance to hear what you really think. Give them a chance to figure out who you really are, and let's see if they want to have a relationship with that person. Because that's what's going to be best for you at the end.
Then it can be cut off.
If they don't, and you are financially independent and you can live your life happily, then you got to do what you got to do, right? But if you can have a relationship with them, then I say do it. But that's just me.
Definitely.
So I hope that was helpful.
Well,
Thanks
you
for calling
guys
in.
so
Yeah.
much. It was actually just talking things out helps a lot for me.
Yeah. That's why we're here.
Thank you.
No problem. You have a great rest of your night. And that was our last call for the night. I want to give.
Aww.
I know. But don't go away just yet, folks. We're going to go to the after show Discord. So click the link to that if you haven't already. Get set up, get started, because we're going to go in there for a bit, do some Q&A. But before we do that, I want to give a very special thanks to Christy Powell for being on the show tonight. Thanks, Christy.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to finally be here.
Yeah. And so if people want to find where you're at, where should they go?
Sure. I'm on the web as Valence Counseling, valencecounseling.com, or on Instagram or Facebook. And then, of course, every Thursday night we do Secular Sexuality. So hope you'll check that out as well.
Yeah. And as always, folks, this is Truth Wanted. This is a live show. We tape it live every week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. So if you missed it this time, come join us next time on the YouTube channel. But you can also find this show on iTunes, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts. Be sure to leave a review or comment, like, subscribe, do all the fun stuff because it helps us out. Another way you can support the show is, again, by donating to our Patreon, patreon.com/truthwanted, or checking out our merch. We got a lot of merch, and we got face masks now. That's crazy. Still can't believe I'm saying that, but that's the world we're living in. And you can also support us by becoming a YouTube member as well. If you're in the live chat, you may have seen some cool little emoticons going around. That's how you get those. It's just another way to support the show. You can find me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan, and there's a Facebook fan group as well for Truth Wanted that you can join, and I highly recommend you do. Let's see. I cannot forget to thank, because I have sometimes, and I'm bad for it. I gotta thank the crew for making this show happen every single week. It's not just call screeners, Katie. It's a lot of people that help make this show happen, and thank you guys so much for making Truth Wanted the awesome thing that it is. Christy, if you could be anything for Halloween, no holds barred.
Oh, shit.
What would you be?
Oh, good goddamn. I'll tell you what, I wish that I could pull off like a proper John Wick look. My girlfriend's got a real Keanu Reeves thing, so I'm growing out the hair. Like, if I can get rid of the glasses, I think that'll be it.
That would be amazing. I would pay money to see that. I honestly would. Did we make that a Patreon goal for secular sexuality?
Yes. Hey, let's do it.
That's awesome. All right, guys. Well, that is about it for this episode of Truth Wanted. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
Sorry, but the show has ended. Goodbye.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.